What happens when a woman threatens an 82-year-old grandmother just because she is sitting on the porch? No one expected that this grandmother would put her in her place, so much so that the whole neighborhood froze. You ever have one of those mornings where the sun's out, birds chirping, coffee hot, and then a devil in beige heels shows up to ruin it all? Yeah, that was my Tuesday. Let me back up. Name's Marcus, I'm 42, born and raised in Georgia, came back home last year after Mama passed to take care of my grandma, Miss Loretta. She's 82, sharper than a tack on most days, but after a small stroke last winter, she's been moving a little slower. Still got that fire in her, though. If you ever met her, you'd know she's the kind of woman who makes cornbread from scratch and will cut her eyes at you so sharp you'll apologize even if you didn't do nothing. That morning, I just finished setting her up on the front porch like I always do. She loves her mornings wrapped in a blanket, a little cup of sweet tea, watching the birds flutter over her hydrangeas. It's her peace. That porch is her throne. And my job every day is making sure she sits on it feeling like a queen. Now let me tell you something, there's nothing suspicious about an elderly woman sitting on her own porch drinking tea, minding her business. Unless, of course, you're Karen. Oh yeah, the Karen. The president of our neighborhood beautification committee, which ain't nothing but a fake title she gave herself cause nobody else in this cul-de-sac has the energy to argue with her. She moved in from up north, said she wanted a quieter life. Now she spends her time putting sticky notes on people's doors talking about violations. Didn't even ask nobody? So anyway, I'm heading back inside to grab some eggs for breakfast when I hear the screech, not from a bird, not from a child, but from a voice that sounds like it's allergic to joy. Excuse me. Excuse me. I turn around slow, already knowing in my spirit that trouble just walked up my driveway. And there she is. Karen. Hairpins so tight you'd think she slept standing up. Sunglasses that cover half her face. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, recording my house like she's exposing a crime scene. Is that your grandmother? She snaps, pointing to Miss Loretta like she just spotted a fugitive. I look at her, blink twice, and say, yes ma'am, that's my grandma. Why? She's been sitting out here every morning, watching the children. I've had multiple complaints. This is highly inappropriate. I laugh. Out loud. Thought she was joking. But no, homegirl is dead serious. She just sits and stares, she continues, eyes narrowing. It's unsettling. Parents are concerned. Now hold on just a minute. Unsettling? My grandma can barely make it down the stairs without help. She's not staring, she's looking. And if your kid's so easily unsettled by an old woman in a blanket drinking tea, maybe the problem ain't her. I try to stay cool. She's on her own property, miss, I say, trying real hard to keep my tone level. This porch has been here longer than your HOA and those overpriced shrubs you planted on city land. Karen gasps like I slapped her with a Bible. Well, she huffs, if she continues to loiter like this, we'll be forced to take legal action. Or worse, mental health intervention. I've already contacted a counselor for observation. I freeze. Not out of fear, out of fury. Observation? I say. You threatening to institutionalize my grandmother for sitting on her porch? She blinks as if I'm the unreasonable one. I'm simply enforcing community wellness. If she's incapable of understanding boundaries, we must act. I take a step closer. Not threatening, but real clear. You got two options, I say. You turn around and walk back to your plastic flower bed, or I'll call the real police, not that fake HOA hotline you printed from a Microsoft Word template. Karen crosses her arms. You'll regret being uncooperative. Then, and this part still burns, she leans in toward Miss Loretta just enough to make her flinch. She waves that phone in front of her face and snaps, smile, sweetheart. This video's going to Adult Protective Services. Now, I ain't the kind of man who yells. I was raised better. But there's a sound I made in that moment that I didn't know lived in me. Step away from my grandma. Karen did slowly, but not before throwing out one last gem. 10 minutes. That's all it'll take. You'll see. Then she sashays back to her car like she just gave the State of the Union. The air changed after she left. My hands were shaken. Miss Loretta looked confused, scared. She gripped the sides of the chair like she was trying to keep from floating away. I knelt next to her, touched her shoulder gently. You okay, Nana? She didn't answer. Just whispered, they tried this, once before. I didn't know what she meant. She didn't say another word for an hour. Exactly 10 minutes later, not 11, not 9, a silver van pulled up in front of our house. No sirens, no flashing lights. Just plain. Two people stepped out, dressed in scrubs. One of them had a clipboard. The other held a tablet. They looked like nurses. Or orderlies. Or something in between. I met them on the grass, chest tight. Can I help y'all? The woman smiled politely. Hi. We're here on a wellness check for a Miss Loretta Williams. We received a report of mental distress from a community observer. Mind if we speak with her? Now I know the type. They weren't bad people. Just pawns in a game they didn't even know they were playing. You got a warrant? I asked, jaw clenched. No, sir. Just a community tip. These checks are voluntary. I nodded. Stepped aside. Let them talk to my grandmother. She was quiet. Alert, but withdrawn. They asked questions. She answered softly. But that old fire? That fire that makes her Loretta? It wasn't there. And I knew why. They finished the check in under 5 minutes. She's fine, the woman said gently. But if any more complaints come through, it may escalate. Escalate. That's the word Karen used. I watched them leave. Then I walked back to the porch, sat next to Miss Loretta, and stared down the street. I knew what was coming. Not the details, not the plan. But I knew. I could feel it in my bones. Karen had declared war, and her weapon was the system. To be continued. What happened next changed everything. You do not want to miss how this escalated. Stick around, it gets wild. You ever sit in your own house and feel like you're trespassing? Like the ground under your feet don't belong to you no more, not 'cause you lost it, but 'cause somebody's trying to convince the world you don't deserve it? That was me the day after Karen came for my grandma. I ain't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, no, fear wasn't the word. It was deeper than that. Something colder. Like I was watching a storm roll in and couldn't do nothing but board the windows and pray the roof held. I sat by the window most of the night, one eye on the street, the other on Miss Loretta. She was quiet. Too quiet. Usually, even on her slower days, she'd hum. Gospel. Motown. Sometimes she'd tell stories to no one in particular, little tales about her daddy's grocery store or how her sister used to sneak biscuits into church. But that morning? Silence. Not one note. Not even a head nod. I cooked breakfast, her favorite, grits, scrambled eggs, and that honey turkey bacon she liked. She didn't touch a bite. Just stared at the window the same way she did when they took Papa to the hospital and he didn't come back. And all I could think was that woman took something from her. Not property. Not rights. Something harder to measure. Something sacred. Dignity. Peace. And I wasn't gonna let it slide. I figured if Karen wanted to weaponize the system, I'd start learning the rules of her game. So I walked 2 blocks over to her house not to confront her, but to see if there even was a real HOA. Turns out the sign out front that said Community Integrity Watch wasn't backed by anything but a $12 lawn stake and a badly laminated flyer taped to her mailbox. Now here's the thing, we never signed on to no homeowners association. Our property was grandfathered in before the subdivision even existed. We're outside the jurisdiction. She knew that. She just didn't care. She didn't want compliance. She wanted control. And when people like her feel like they're losing control, oh, they double down. That afternoon, I was refastening the old screen door. The wind had busted it loose the week before when I heard tires crunching over gravel. 2 SUVs. Big ones. Black. Tinted windows. The kind that show up when someone's trying to impress the neighborhood or intimidate it. Both vehicles pulled right into our driveway like they owned it. Out stepped Karen wearing a peach blazer and a look like she just got elected mayor. Behind her? 3 folks. 2 men and 1 woman, clipboards, tablets, matching navy polos with a logo that said GPS. Good afternoon, Property Services. I could already smell the mess. Marcus, Karen said, as if we were old church friends. These fine folks are here to do a community assessment. There have been concerns raised about certain safety issues on your property. Safety issues? I repeated, leaning on the doorframe. The tallest man stepped forward. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. We're here to do a voluntary wellness audit based on neighbor reports. If everything checks out, we'll be gone in 15 minutes. I crossed my arms. This is private land. You don't have a warrant. You can take that voluntary part and walk right back to the street. Karen didn't miss a beat. Oh, Marcus. Why so defensive? If everything's fine, you have nothing to hide. That was it. That was the line. That was the exact same thing they said to my uncle when they raided his barbershop on a false tip. That was the line they used when the city tried to seize my cousin's lot in Atlanta. That's the line they always use when they come smiling, with clipboards, pretending to care when really they just want permission to tear your life apart from the inside. I didn't move. Didn't blink. You got 10 seconds to get off my land. The woman from the Gap's crew looked at Karen and said, real low, he's right. We can't force this. Karen's smile faltered. Just for a second. Then she did what all cowards do when they get caught slippin'. She got louder. I am filing a neighborhood security report, she barked. And if necessary, I will escalate this to county level. I've documented hostile behavior. I've got timestamps. My friend is a caseworker. Caseworker? She wasn't even hiding it anymore. This wasn't about property lines. This wasn't about grass height. This woman was building a case to get my grandmother declared unstable. For what? For sitting in the sun? I looked her dead in the eye. You keep messin' around and someone gonna start a skin why you keep targeting the only black family on this block. Her nostrils flared. Oh please. Don't make this about. I cut her off with a hand. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't cuss. Just said, leave. Now. And they did. But she made sure to say one last thing before getting into her SUV. This isn't over, Marcus. I told you. I'm just getting started. That night, 3 things happened. First, our mailbox was tipped over. Not broken. Just tilted at a weird angle enough to let me know someone had been there. Second, Miss Loretta woke up crying. Not loud. Just quiet little sobs. I asked her what was wrong. She said I dreamed they came and took me and nobody stopped them this time. Third, the next morning, the power went out. Only ours. Whole block lit up like Christmas. Our house? Dark. I called the utility company. They said someone had reported hazardous wiring and requested a temporary disconnect for safety. They were just following protocol. I didn't have to ask who filed it. By noon, I was outside trying to hook up the generator when a squad car pulled up. Blue lights. County sheriff. Not with sirens. Not with urgency. No, this was casual. Routine. Like they already knew there wasn't a problem. But someone wanted it to look like there was. Sir, we received a concern about a vulnerable elder in this home, the officer said. He looked uncomfortable. Young. Maybe new. Mind if we step inside? I stared at him for a long moment. Then I opened the door. Miss Loretta was sitting in her chair, wrapped in the same blanket as always. Quiet. Still. They asked questions. She answered some. Not all. She was tired. Disoriented. She kept a skin for my mama. My mama's been gone 3 years. The officer took notes. Looked at me. Then looked back at her. Everything seems okay, he finally said. But we'll need to file a wellness report. For liability. I didn't argue. Because I knew what this was. This wasn't just Karen being nosy. This wasn't her needing to feel important. This was a campaign. And let me tell you something, when you see someone use the very systems that are supposed to protect the vulnerable to attack the vulnerable, you stop playing defense. You stop being polite. You stop hoping the world's gonna wake up and do right. You stand up. And you fight back. Because if you don't, people like Karen, they'll keep winning. They'll keep talking. And one day you'll wake up to find they already took everything. This is the turning point. What's about to go down in chapter 3? You better not blink because everything is about to explode. You ever hear silence so loud it feels like a warning? That's what the house felt like that morning. Miss Loretta hadn't said more than 2 words all weekend. She just sat on the couch, holding her rosary like it was the only thread still keeping her grounded. The TV was on, but the sound was low, some old western, the kind Papa used to watch. And all I could think while looking at her was, she looks like she's waiting on something. I ain't never seen her that still. Not when the bank tried to take the land. Not when the hurricane hit and the roof collapsed. Not even at my mama's funeral. That morning, she was just waiting. And I didn't like it. I spent most of that day making calls trying to get ahead of whatever Karen was set in up next. I called the city, the utility board, the fire marshal. I asked about permits, codes, violations, anything she might have filed. One by one, they gave me that same line. We can't disclose details about community-submitted reports. Translation, she's building something and y'all just letting her do it. I even tried talking to a lawyer downtown. Nice lady. Real sharp. She looked through the deeds and HOA charters and said, legally, she has no power over your land. I said, ma'am, that may be true on paper, but paper ain't out here dealing with her every day. She nodded. Said she understood. But legal understanding don't mean protection. Not when folks like Karen know how to work the gray areas. That afternoon, I took Miss Loretta out on the porch. She didn't ask to go, she just looked at me with those eyes like she didn't want to disappear inside again. So I helped her down the steps one slow shuffle at a time. Wrapped her up in that red shawl she loved. Sat next to her with a lemonade in my hand and tried to enjoy 5 minutes of peace. Didn't even get to 3. I heard the engine first. Then I saw the van. Same silver one from last time, only this time it wasn't alone. It was followed by a second van. White. Unmarked. No logos. Just tinted glass and a wide back door. I stood up fast. My chest got tight. From both vans, people climbed out. Some I recognized, the same 2 nurses who came before. But this time, they brought backup. 4 of them total. And behind them? Karen. Looking like the cat that swallowed a whole flock of canaries. She had a manila folder under one arm and her phone in the other hand already recording. This is the one I told you about, she said loud enough for all the neighbors to hear. She's exhibiting signs of paranoia, memory loss, aggression. I've logged every incident. I stepped down from the porch like I was moving through water. Don't you dare come near her. The woman in scrubs raised a hand. Sir, we're with County Outreach. We received an urgent report under the Health and Dignity Clause. We just need to ask her a few. She's not answering anything, I said, voice steady. She's not going anywhere. She's on her porch. On her land. Karen stepped closer, smug. She doesn't even know what day it is. She's been hallucinating. You told me yourself, remember? When she asked for her husband last week? Who's been gone 10 years? I stared at her. You came to my house. You scared her. You filmed her without consent. You filed a false report. And now you're trying to drag her out of here like she's some wild animal? Karen blinked. I'm trying to protect this community. You're trying to erase it. Then it happened. One of the orderlies stepped toward Miss Loretta. Slow. Careful. But she saw him. And I swear, something broke inside her. She stood up. That frail woman who needed help just to hold a teacup? She stood up on her own, full height, shawl slipping off her shoulders. And with a voice that didn't sound like her usual whisper, she said, Don't touch me. Everyone froze. Even Karen. I was born in this house, Miss Loretta continued, voice trembling with steel. I had my babies in this house. I buried my husband with my own 2 hands out back. Ain't a soul here who's talking me out that gate unless I say so. The silence that followed? You could hear a leaf fall. The nurse took a step back. Karen, though, she wasn't done. She's delusional, she snapped. This is what I've been warning y'all about. She needs professional care. That's when I saw it. The neighbors. 3 of them. Miss Daphne from 2 doors down. Old Mr. Lee and his wife. They'd stepped out onto their porches. Watching. Listening. And that changed the game. Because when people start watching, folks like Karen don't perform so well. One of the nurses whispered something to the man next to her. He nodded. Then, to Karen's visible rage, he turned and said, We can't force a removal. She's coherent. This isn't our call. Karen's jaw dropped. What do you mean? I logged everything. I have footage. You saw the clip where she said her husband's name. The nurse shook her head. That's not enough for emergency removal. You should have gone through probate. And just like that, it was over. Or at least, I thought it was. Karen turned on her heel, shoved the folder at the nurse, and stomped toward the street. But halfway to her car, she stopped. Whipped out her phone. Dialed fast. Then, loud enough for all of us to hear. Yes, hello? This is Karen Bishop. I need to report a situation, possible elder neglect, obstruction, verbal threat. Yes, I'm at the Williams property now. The black house. Right? The old one. I saw red. I stepped forward. You just can't help yourself, can you? She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. Because in that moment, everyone around her, the nurses, the neighbors, even the sheriff's deputy who happened to drive by right then, heard what she said. And they saw what she was doing. Not helping. Not protecting. Just targeting. Now I won't tell you what happened next, not yet. But I'll tell you this. That was the moment the tide turned. The second Karen realized that her little game wasn't invisible anymore. People saw her. And they weren't on her side. This is the breaking point. What comes next? You think you've seen drama? You have no idea. Chapter 4 is where it all lands, and you'll want to be there when it does. It's a strange thing, watching the world turn back in your favor. After weeks of being gaslit, threatened, and stepped on, I found myself standing in the middle of my porch with the wind finally blowing in the right direction. But don't get me wrong, it wasn't peace yet. No, this wasn't the end of the war. This was the start of the reckoning. And it didn't begin with fists or fire. It started with a folding chair and a microphone. 2 days after the standoff on my porch, I got a call. The neighborhood had called a community meeting, the real kind, not one of Karen's cardboard HOA speeches with cheese cubes and sign-up sheets for flower patrol. This was held at the local rec center. Now, normally, I'd stay out of that kind of mess. But I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my grandmother. It was about our name. And it was about every single person in that neighborhood who'd been told to sit down, shut up, or get out. So I went. And I brought Miss Loretta. Not in silence. Not in fear. In her best Sunday coat, her pearls, and her head held high. Because that's what dignity looks like. The rec center was packed. Some came for the drama. Others came because they finally felt like they could. The Whisper Network had been buzzing 4 days. People had stories. Things Karen had said, done, threatened. And for once, they were ready to talk. Karen showed up late. Of course. She walked in with that same tight smile, clipboard in hand, but you could see it, that little twitch at the corner of her eye, like the mask wasn't sticking quite like it used to. The moderator, a retired teacher named Mrs. Holcomb, who everyone respected because she didn't play favorites, opened the floor. And baby, when I tell you the room erupted. It started with Mr. Lee. Calm. Direct. She told my wife we couldn't hang our flag on our own porch. Said it wasn't aesthetically consistent. Then Ms. Daphne. She threatened to report my grandson for noise pollution cause he plays saxophone on Saturdays. Then the young couple from across the street. She said our fence violated line of sight codes. We checked with the county. There's no such code. And then it was my turn. I didn't yell. Didn't cuss. Didn't swing. I just stepped up to that mic and spoke plain. Karen Bishop came to my home uninvited. She accused my 82-year-old grandmother of being a danger to children because she was sitting on her porch. She called outreach. She tried to have her removed. And when it didn't work, she tried again. And again. She called the police. She cut her power. She brought strangers to our land. And when that failed, she started making calls, saying things like the Black House and the old one. I paused. Let it breathe. She didn't just try to erase my grandmother. She tried to erase our place. Our right to be here. You could hear a pin drop. Then someone in the back stood up. I have a video. It was one of the nurses. From the second visit. She played the clip from her phone. Karen saying clear as day. She's confused. I'm doing what's best. These people don't know how to care for their own. That was the moment everything cracked. Karen tried to speak, stammer something about context, but it was over. That mask? Gone. Mrs. Holcomb stood up and said one sentence that felt like thunder. You are hereby removed from all neighborhood positions effective immediately. But it didn't stop there. See, what Karen didn't know was that I'd done more than just talk. I'd filed paperwork. Real paperwork. With help from the legal clinic downtown, I'd submitted a formal complaint with the County Elder Advocacy Board. I'd attached statements. Dates. Footage. That audio clip? Gold. Turns out, false reports against vulnerable adults? That's not just immoral, it's a violation. The very next week, 2 county investigators showed up at Karen's home. She wasn't wearing that peach blazer anymore. Meanwhile, back on my block, things changed. Neighbors started speaking to each other again. Real conversations. Not just waves from behind curtains. People brought food to the porch. A young man offered to fix our mailbox. Miss Daphne brought flowers. And Miss Loretta? She smiled. First time in weeks. She sat back on that porch like nothing ever happened, humming Sam Cooke real soft, like the whole world had finally caught up to what she already knew. Now don't get it twisted. One meeting didn't change the world. One Karen gone doesn't mean the system's fixed. But this was a line in the sand. And I stood on the right side of it. The biggest lesson I learned? You can't fight shadows with silence. You can't wait for permission to defend your people. And most of all, never underestimate a woman with pearls, a folding chair, and a porch full of history. Because that's not just a house. That's a legacy. And legacies don't go quietly. The end.